I found the engagement ring on my kitchen counter next to a handwritten note, my future suddenly dissolving before my morning coffee had finished brewing. After 6 years together, he was gone, moved in with Amber, my best friend since college, the same woman who'd helped him pick out that diamond. When I finally worked up the courage to face her, she leaned across the cafe table, her new bracelet catching the light, and said with genuine conviction, "You should thank me for saving you." The sympathy in her eyes hurt more than the betrayal. I found the engagement ring on my kitchen counter next to a handwritten note, my future suddenly dissolving before my morning coffee had finished brewing. After 6 years together, he was gone, moved in with Amber, my best friend since college, the same woman who'd helped him pick out that diamond. When I finally worked up the courage to face her, she leaned across the cafe table, her new bracelet catching the light, and said with genuine conviction, "You should thank me for saving you." The sympathy in her eyes hurt more than the betrayal, but that confrontation came later. The real beginning was a Tuesday morning, ordinary in every way until my phone buzzed with a message that would shatter the life I thought I had. I was at my desk reviewing client proposals when my phone lit up with Rachel's name. I smiled reflexively. 15 years of friendship creates automatic responses. We'd met in freshman year of college, became roommates by sophomore year, and had been inseparable ever since. She was my maid of honor, naturally. The one who'd helped James plan his elaborate proposal on the beach last year. I opened the message, expecting wedding details or plans for our regular Friday drinks. "Zoe, I've been trying to find the right way to tell you this, but there isn't one. James and I have been seeing each other for the past 4 months. He's moving in with me today. You should thank me for saving you from marrying him." My fingers froze over the screen. The world narrowed to those words, sharp and impossible. I read them again, certain I'd misunderstood. The bustling office around me faded to background noise. For months. While we were planning our wedding. While she was helping me choose floral arrangements, I set my phone down with deliberate care and stared at my computer screen, unseeing. My hands didn't shake. My breath remained steady. Years of presenting to difficult clients had taught me how to compartmentalize, how to keep emotion locked away when necessary. But inside, something was cracking open, spilling cold dread through my chest. A follow-up message arrived, the phone buzzing against my desk like an angry wasp. "I know this is a shock, but eventually you'll see this is for the best. James was never right for you. The signs were there, you just didn't want to see them. We didn't mean for this to happen." Of course they didn't. No one ever does. I picked up my phone and typed, "Is this some kind of joke?" though I already knew it wasn't. Rachel wasn't cruel in that way. Apparently, she saved her cruelty for deeper betrayals. I wish it were. "I'm sorry. James is packing his things now. We thought it was better to tell you before you got home." We. The casual plurals of conspiracy. Memories began resurfacing like debris after a shipwreck. James's late nights at the office. Rachel's sudden cancellations of our lunch dates. The way they'd both been on their phones constantly at my birthday dinner last month, smiling at their screens. I scrolled through my recent texts with James. This morning's message wishing me a good day. Last night's exchange about dinner plans. The comfortable, mundane communication of two people sharing a life. Had he sent those messages from Rachel's bed, as if triggered by my thoughts, a notification from Instagram appeared. Rachel had posted a photo, her hand intertwined with a man's, her newly manicured nails, we'd gotten them done together on Saturday, prominently displayed. The caption read, "Sometimes the heart finds its true path in unexpected places." #new beginnings, the comments were already accumulating. Confused mutual friends. Excited colleagues who didn't know the context. Someone had tagged James. He had liked the post. I closed the app and placed my phone face down on the desk. The proposal I'd been reviewing suddenly seemed absurdly unimportant. My engagement ring felt heavy on my finger, a promise now hollowed out and meaningless. "Zoe? Are you okay?" My assistant Megan stood at my office door, concern etched across her face. "You look pale." I straightened my shoulders and smiled. A client was arriving in 20 minutes. I had a presentation to give. Life, apparently, continued its forward motion even when your personal world imploded. "I'm fine," I said, the lie smooth and practiced. "Just need some coffee." As I walked to the break room, phone clutched in my hand, another message arrived. James this time. "I'm sorry it happened this way. But I think we both know things weren't working between us. Rachel and I didn't plan this. We just connected in a way I never expected. I hope someday you can understand." The corporate platitudes of betrayal. As if I should congratulate them on finding true love at my expense. I in the empty break room, I stared at my reflection in the microwave door. Same shoulder-length dark hair. Same green eyes. Same face I'd had yesterday when I was still someone's fiancé, someone's best friend. Now I was just the woman who hadn't been enough to. My phone buzzed again. "Rachel, I've taken down the venue deposit from our shared wedding planning folder. James and I will handle canceling everything. It's the least we can do." The venue. Our venue. The historic garden estate we'd visited 6 times before booking. The place I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl. Of course they'd take that too. I poured coffee with steady hands, added cream with precision. Took a sip and let the bitterness ground me. 1 breath. 2. This wasn't the time to fall apart. That would come later, in private, where no one could witness my humiliation. My finger hovered over Rachel's contact information. I could call her. Scream. Demand explanations. But what would that accomplish? They'd made their choice, both of them. The people I'd trusted most had decided I was disposable. I returned to my office, set my coffee down, and opened my computer. My presentation was waiting. Client expectations didn't pause for personal tragedy. I would get through this meeting. Then the next. I would function, and later, when I was alone, I would figure out what came next. As I walked into the conference room, shoulders back, presentation ready, I made one decision. I would not be their victim. Whatever came next, I would face it on my terms, not theirs. They thought they had all the power. They thought they knew how this story would unfold, me broken and them triumphant in their new love. They were wrong. The drive home from work was a blur, muscle memory guiding me through familiar streets while my mind spun with questions that had no answers. Why? When had it started? Had I missed the signs? Had everyone known but me? I pulled into my driveway, immediately spotting James's sleek black Audi still parked where it always was. My stomach twisted. He was still here. I'd hoped to have the space to myself, to begin processing without an audience. The house looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. Same front door with its seasonal wreath, Rachel had helped me make it. Same perfectly trimmed hedges, James's Sunday morning ritual. Same life I'd thought was mine, now revealed as an elaborate facade. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering strength. My phone showed 18 missed calls, colleagues who'd seen Rachel's post, friends seeking confirmation, my mother who'd probably heard through our hometown grapevine. I silenced it and slipped it into my pocket. The world could wait. The front door opened smoothly, no dramatic resistance to match the churning in my chest. Music was playing from upstairs, our bedroom, and the sound of drawers opening and closing carried down the hallway. I set my purse on the entryway table, next to the framed photo of James and me in Maui last year. His arm around my waist, both of us sunburned and laughing. "James?" I called out, hating how normal my voice sounded. The music stopped. Footsteps crossed the floor above, then descended the stairs. And there he was, the man I'd planned to marry, dressed in jeans and a gray sweater I'd given him for Christmas, looking simultaneously familiar and like a complete stranger. "Zoe." He stopped halfway down, as if reluctant to come closer. "I thought you'd be home later." Clearly, I replied, noticing the suitcases lined up by the door. "Planning a clean getaway?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I didn't want to make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder than it needs to be," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Like informing me via text that you're leaving me for my best friend? That level of difficulty." James descended the rest of the stairs, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it just seemed calculated, another performance. "I know how this looks, enlighten me," I cut in, surprised by the ice in my voice. "Tell me exactly how this looks, James." He sighed, the long-suffering exhalation of a man who considered himself misunderstood. Things between us haven't been right for a while, Zoe. You know that. We've been going through the motions, planning this wedding because it was expected, not because it's what we really want. I stared at him, genuinely stunned. That's news to me. When exactly did we decide our relationship was just going through the motions? Come on, Zoe. His tone shifted to one I recognized from our rare arguments, slightly condescending, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. You've been distant for months. Always working late, constantly stressed about your clients, postponing date nights for business dinners. I was building my career, I said, the unfairness of his accusation like a slap. Something you said you supported. I did support you. But when was the last time we really talked? Really connected? Rachel and I don't. I held up a hand. Don't you dare talk about connecting with Rachel. A flash of guilt crossed his face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. It wasn't planned. We started talking when you were too busy, and things just evolved. She understands me in ways you stopped trying to. When I was too busy, I repeated. So this is my fault? I was working too hard, so naturally you had to sleep with my best friend. That's not what I'm saying, he protested, but we both knew it was exactly what he meant. I walked past him into the kitchen, needing space, needing air. On the counter beside the coffee maker sat a small velvet box and a folded piece of paper. My engagement ring and, presumably, some kind of explanation or apology. Seriously? I gestured to the items. You left my ring on the counter like a tip for the cleaning service? James followed me, keeping his distance. I thought you might not want to see me. I wrote everything down, how I feel, why this happened. How considerate. I left the note where it was, untouched. And our wedding venue? Rachel mentioned you'd handle the cancellations. He shifted uncomfortably. About that. The thing is, we've actually decided to keep the reservation. The room seemed to tilt. You're keeping our wedding date? Our venue. It makes financial sense, he said, as if we were discussing a business transaction. The deposit is non-refundable, and it's such a perfect location. I laughed then, a sharp sound with no humor in it. Of course. Why let a little thing like betraying me get in the way of your perfect day? Zoe, be reasonable, reasonable. My voice finally cracked, emotion breaking through. You're planning to marry my best friend at the venue we chose together, and I'm supposed to be reasonable? James had the audacity to look annoyed. This is exactly why things didn't work between us. You always turn everything into a drama. Something inside me went very still. Is that what Rachel tells you? That I'm dramatic? That I'm unreasonable? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I opened our refrigerator, movements deliberately calm, and took out a bottle of water. How long? What? How long have you been sleeping with her? The truth, James. He hesitated, and I knew whatever number he gave would be a lie. A few months. For, according to Rachel's text. Since February? He nodded reluctantly. February, I repeated. When I was in Chicago for that conference. The weekend Rachel stayed here to water the plants because you had that emergency client meeting? His silence was damning. And our engagement party in March? The one Rachel organized at her apartment? Were you two together then too? Zoe, what's the point of this? It's over. We can't change what happened. I took a long drink of water, giving myself time to regain control. I just want to understand the timeline of my humiliation. I moved to the living room, where I noticed several items missing: the vintage record player I'd restored for him, the leather chair his parents had given us, the signed baseball he'd displayed in the study. Taking half the furniture too? I asked, gesturing to the empty spaces. Only what's mine, he replied defensively. And the joint account? Is that yours too? I'd seen the banking notification earlier, but had been too shocked by Rachel's message to process it. He had the decency to flush. I took what I contributed. My direct deposits, my portion of our savings. That's not how joint accounts work, James. That money was ours, regardless of who deposited it. Fine, I'll transfer some back, he muttered, pulling out his phone as if to do it immediately. Don't bother. I walked to the window, staring out at the garden we'd planned together. Just finish packing and leave. He stood there for a moment, seemingly unsure whether to defend himself further or simply escape. Finally, he went back upstairs, and I heard more drawers opening, more items being collected. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Rachel again. James says you're home. Are you okay? I know this is awful, but I really do believe it's for the best. You deserve someone who truly appreciates you. The breathtaking hypocrisy of her concern made my hands shake. I typed a response, deleted it, tried again. Finally settled on, "Don't contact me again." Her reply was instant. "I understand you're angry, but someday I hope we can talk. Our friendship has always meant so much to me." I stared at the words, unable to reconcile them with her actions. If our friendship meant anything, how could she have done this? Her next message arrived before I could respond. "James just said you're upset about the venue. I'm sorry about that, but it really is perfect for what we're planning. A smaller, more intimate ceremony. Nothing like the elaborate event you wanted. I hope you understand." Understanding dawned cold and clear. This wasn't just about James. This was about Rachel wanting what I had always since college. My internships. My apartment. And now, my fiancé and my wedding. When James came downstairs with the last of his things, I was sitting on the couch, still as stone. "I think that's everything," he said, hovering awkwardly. "I'll get the rest later, when things are calmer." "There won't be a calmer," I replied. "Send movers for anything else. I don't want to see either of you again." He sighed. "Zoe, we didn't want to hurt you. These things just happen sometimes." I looked at him then, really looked at the man I'd thought I knew. "No, James. Affairs don't just happen. Betrayal doesn't just happen. You made choices, both of you, knowing exactly what it would cost me." "I'm sorry you're hurt," he said, not contradicting me. "But Rachel and I, it's different. Special. I hope someday you'll find what we have." The audacity of his statement left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it was steady and cold. "Get out." He gathered his bags, pausing at the door. "I'll call you in a few days, when you've had time to process." "Don't bother," I said. After he left, the house fell into silence. I sat motionless, listening to the absence of his presence, the space where our life together had been. The ring box still sat on the counter, a glittering reminder of promises broken. My phone buzzed one final time that evening. Rachel again, unable to resist having the last word. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but I really did save you from a mediocre marriage. James needs someone who understands his ambitions, his dreams. You two were never truly compatible. One day you'll thank me." I finally turned off my phone, set it aside, and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Not just the loss of a relationship, but the calculated cruelty of it. The deliberate theft of my future by the two people I had trusted most. Tears finally came, hot and silent. I made myself a promise. They would regret underestimating me. They thought this story was over, that I would simply fade away, the discarded fiancé, while they built their perfect life from the rubble of mine. They were wrong. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 3 days after James left, I finally forced myself to examine the wreckage of my life with clear eyes. The weekend had passed in a blur of ignored calls, delivery food, and fitful sleep. I'd called in sick to work, something I'd never done before, unable to face sympathetic glances or, worse, pitying whispers. But by Monday morning, something had shifted. The paralyzing shock had hardened into something colder, more focused. If I was going to rebuild, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I sat at our dining table, laptop open, a legal pad beside me. The methodical process of documentation had always been my strength, the reason clients trusted me with their most complex projects. Now I would apply those same skills to mapping the destruction of my personal life. First, the financial entanglements. I logged into our joint account, confirming what I'd already suspected. James had withdrawn $28,500, not just his recent deposits, but the entirety of his contributions over the past year. The balance remaining was barely enough to cover next month's mortgage. I noted the date and time of the withdrawal, Tuesday morning, 9:17 a.m. Less than an hour after Rachel had texted me. They'd had it planned down to the minute. Next, I checked our shared credit cards. A pattern emerged quickly. Over the past 4 months, there were charges I didn't recognize. Dinners at restaurants we'd never visited together, hotel stays on weekends when James had claimed to be at business conferences, a jewelry store purchase from 3 weeks ago. I pulled up the receipt details, a white gold bracelet with a diamond pendant. $1,200. The same bracelet Rachel had been wearing at her Instagram photo, catching the light as she posed with her hand on James's chest. A gift purchased with our shared credit line. I created a spreadsheet, documenting each charge, each withdrawal, building a timeline of their betrayal through financial records. The methodical task kept the hurt at bay, transforming it into something more useful. Evidence. My phone rang, my mother again. I'd been avoiding her calls, not ready for the conversation I knew we'd have. But eventually, I'd need to tell her the wedding was off. That the save-the-date cards she'd helped address were now just another piece of debris in the aftermath. Instead of answering, I opened my email. Our wedding planning folder stared back at me, a meticulously organized collection of contracts, deposits, and confirmations. Rachel had been my co-planner, of course. She'd insisted, claiming it was her duty as maid of honor. I clicked through the documents, stomach twisting as I realized how completely she'd embedded herself in every aspect of my wedding. She'd been the one to suggest the garden estate venue. It's so you, Zoe. Classic, but not stuffy. She'd helped choose the flowers, the photographer, the menu. Had she already been planning to take my place? A subfolder labeled honeymoon caught my eye. Inside were the confirmations for the 2-week trip to Greece we'd booked, first-class flights, luxury hotels with private plunge pools, sunset cruises between islands. James and I had spent months planning it, saving for it, except, according to the most recent email, the reservation had been modified. The dates had been changed to July, 2 months from now. The name on the bookings was now Rachel Bennett and James Harrington. They weren't just taking my wedding venue. They were taking my honeymoon too. I felt a strange calm descend as I saved screenshots of everything. This wasn't just opportunism. This was calculated. Deliberate. They'd been planning this transition for months, waiting for the right moment to discard me while keeping all the arrangements I'd helped create. My phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source, James's sister Ellie. Zoe, are you okay? I just heard what happened from Mom. Please call me when you can. I'm on your side. Ellie and I had always gotten along well, much to James's occasional annoyance. She was 5 years younger than him, fierce and straightforward where he was diplomatic to the point of opacity. I wondered what version of events the Harrington family had received. I returned to my investigation, turning next to social media. I hadn't looked at any platform since Tuesday, unwilling to see the public celebration of my humiliation. Now I forced myself to log in, scrolling methodically through posts and comments. Rachel had been busy. Multiple photos of her and James together, carefully captioned to suggest a relationship that had developed naturally, ethically. Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it, read one. The heart wants what it wants, proclaimed another. The comments section was a battlefield. Some friends expressed confusion, asking tentative questions about me, about timing. Others offered enthusiastic congratulations, either unaware of the situation or choosing to ignore it. Rachel had responded strategically to each, painting herself as reluctant, noble even, someone who had tried to resist these feelings but ultimately couldn't deny real love. On James's page, less activity but the same narrative. Vague references to difficult decisions and following his heart. A carefully constructed reality where he wasn't the villain, but the hero of his own love story. I took screenshots of everything, adding them to my growing file. Then I noticed something odd. Photos that had included me, group shots from parties, holiday gatherings, weekend trips, had been systematically untagged or removed from both their profiles. It was as if they were erasing me from their history, creating space for their new narrative. As I dug deeper, patterns emerged. Rachel commenting on James's posts with increasing frequency over the past 6 months. Inside jokes. References to conversations I hadn't been part of. The digital breadcrumbs of an affair conducted partly in plain sight. Then I found something I wasn't expecting. A check-in from February at the Lakeside Resort and Spa, 3 hours north of the city. Posted by a mutual friend, Alex, with a group photo that included both James and Rachel. The caption read, "Weekend getaway with the crew." I stared at the date, February 15th to 17th. The exact weekend I'd been in Chicago for my conference. I scrolled through the comments until I found Rachel's response, such a needed break. "Thanks for including us last minute." Us. Not her. Us. I pulled up my text history with James from that weekend. His messages about a client emergency, having to work through the weekend, being too busy to talk much. All lies. He had been at a lakeside resort with my best friend, surrounded by people we both knew, which meant other people had known all along. I messaged Alex immediately. Who else was at the lake house in February? His response came quickly. "Zoe, I'm so sorry about everything. I swear I didn't know what was happening until it was too late." "Who else was there, Alex?" A pause. Then, me and Sarah, Chris and Aaron, James and Rachel. "I thought you knew Rachel was coming. She said you'd asked her to check in on James since you were out of town." Each name was a fresh betrayal. Chris and Aaron were supposedly my friends too. They'd sat at my dinner table, accepted my hospitality, all while knowing James was cheating. "When did you realize they were together?" I asked. "Not until that weekend." They tried to be subtle, but it was obvious something was happening. Sarah confronted Rachel about it, and Rachel said you and James were having problems, that you were practically broken up already. We didn't know what to believe. And no one thought to tell me. James said he was going to tell you when you got back from Chicago. Rachel said the same thing. By the time we realized they hadn't, it seemed too late to step in. "I'm really sorry, Zoe." I didn't respond. What was there to say? The circle of betrayal had widened beyond James and Rachel to include friends who had chosen silence over loyalty. As the day wore on, I continued my methodical investigation, discovering more connections, more overlaps, more careful manipulations. Rachel had been promoted at work 3 months ago, moving from marketing coordinator to manager, leapfrogging several more experienced colleagues. The promotion had come shortly after she'd begun working with James's firm on a joint project. The same promotion she'd tearfully celebrated with me over brunch, claiming it was recognition of her hard work and talent. I pulled up my calendar, checking the dates against my growing timeline. James's business trips that aligned with Rachel's girls' weekends. Happy hours I'd been too busy to attend where they'd both been present. Rachel's increasing unavailability for our standing Friday night drinks, always with plausible excuses, always expressed with apparent regret. BY evening, my dining table was covered with notes, my computer screen filled with open tabs documenting months of calculated deception. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't a spontaneous attraction they'd tried to resist. This was a campaign, methodical, patient, thorough. They'd constructed an exit strategy designed to leave me with as little as possible while they seamlessly transitioned into the life I'd helped build. I closed my laptop, exhausted by the weight of discovery. My phone buzzed with another text from Ellie. "I'm coming over tomorrow." No arguments. "You need a friend right now, and I need to tell you some things about my brother." I texted back my address, realizing I'd never actually had Ellie over before. James had always insisted on meeting his family at restaurants or their parents' home, claiming our place was too small for entertaining. Another lie, most likely that as I prepared for bed, one final notification appeared on my phone. An email from the Garden Estate venue, confirming the change of bride's name from Zoe Mitchell to Rachel Bennett. The ceremony would proceed as scheduled on September 25th. My wedding date. My venue. My carefully chosen details, now repurposed for their new love story. I should have felt despair. Instead, I felt something hardening within me, a cold, clear purpose. They thought they had it all figured out. The perfect exit. The perfect narrative. The perfect new beginning built on the foundation of my dreams, but they had overlooked something crucial. In their arrogance, in their focus on what they were taking, they had failed to consider what they were leaving behind. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. Tomorrow, I would begin putting the pieces together differently. Not to rebuild what was broken, but to create something new. Something they hadn't anticipated, because if Rachel and James had taught me anything, it was that the most dangerous opponent is the one you've already dismissed as defeated. Ellie arrived at my door the next morning with coffee, pastries, and a fierce protectiveness that made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. "He's an idiot," she announced, brushing past me into the kitchen. "A complete, absolute moron. And she's worse." I managed a small smile, touched by her loyalty. "You don't have to pick sides, Ellie. He's your brother." She set down the coffee carrier with more force than necessary. "I absolutely do have to pick sides. Being family doesn't excuse what he did." She pushed a cup toward me. "Besides, I've always liked you better anyway." We settled in the living room, where my investigation materials were still spread across the coffee table. Ellie glanced at them but didn't comment. "So," she said, pulling one knee up to her chest, "want to hear something that will make you feel marginally better about dodging this particular bullet?" I raised an eyebrow, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "I'm listening." "This isn't the first time James has done this." She held up a hand when I started to speak. "Not the leaving for the best friend part. That's a new low. But the affair part? Classic James." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. "What do you mean? Remember Melissa? The girlfriend before you?" I nodded. James had dated her for nearly 2 years before we met. He'd explained their breakup as a mutual decision based on different life goals. He cheated on her with his coworker Diane. And before Melissa, there was Kate. He cheated on her with Melissa. A cold clarity spread through me. He has a pattern. Ellie nodded grimly. He gets restless around the 2-year mark. Starts feeling trapped. Looks for an escape hatch. "We were together for 6 years, I pointed out. "Yeah, that's what had me fooled too. I thought he'd finally grown up." She reached for my notes. "May I?" I nodded, watching as she flipped through the timeline I'd constructed. "Jesus, Zoe," she murmured. "You've been busy." "Knowledge is power," I said quietly. "I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Her eyes met mine, sharp with understanding. "You're not just documenting the wreckage. You're planning something." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm not rolling over and playing dead while they steal my life." A slow smile spread across Ellie's face. "Good. What do you need?" For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. Not for reconciliation, that ship had sailed the moment I saw Rachel's text, but for justice. For reclamation. "Information," I said. "Everything you know about James's finances, his professional weaknesses, his secrets." Ellie's smile turned predatory. "I thought you'd never ask." For the next hour, she filled in gaps in my knowledge. How James had been passed over for partner at his firm last year, something he'd never mentioned to me. How his impressive portfolio wasn't performing as well as he pretended. How their parents had been subsidizing his lifestyle for years with loans that everyone knew would never be repaid. "He's leveraged to the hilt," Ellie explained. "The car, the designer wardrobe, those business trips to Vegas, it's all for show. He's one bad month away from financial disaster." I digested this information, adding it to my mental map. "And Rachel? What do you know about her?" Ellie's expression darkened. "Only what James has said. That she's ambitious and understands what it takes to succeed. Whatever that means." "It means she's willing to step on anyone to get ahead," I translated. "Including her best friend." A thought suddenly struck me. I opened my laptop and pulled up the page for my engagement ring. "What are you looking for?" Ellie asked, leaning forward. "This," I said, turning the screen toward her. The certificate of authenticity for my ring, the antique emerald-cut diamond set in platinum, the one James had claimed had been in his family for generations. "That's your ring." Ellie frowned. "I've never seen it before." "Exactly," I said. "James told me it was his grandmother's. That your mother had given it to him specifically for me." Ellie shook her head slowly. "That's a lie. Our grandmother's ring is a sapphire." Mom still wears it on special occasions. Another lie uncovered. But this one might actually work in my favor. I pulled up the legal documentation I'd been researching last night. In this state, engagement rings are considered conditional gifts. If the marriage doesn't occur, the ring goes back to the purchaser, unless the purchaser is the one who broke the engagement. Understanding dawned in Ellie's eyes. And since James broke the engagement by cheating, the ring is legally mine, I finished. All $22,000 of it. Ellie whistled. That's a nice chunk of change. It's a start. I closed the laptop. But there's more. I explained about the joint accounts, the shared credit cards, the wedding deposits. About the lease on our home, which was in both our names. About the car James had insisted we co-finance despite my objections. On paper, I concluded, half of everything is mine. Including some things he doesn't realize. Ellie leaned forward. Like what? I pulled out one final document, a folder James had asked me to store in our home safe months ago. Like his partnership application. The one with the inflated client numbers and creative accounting. Her eyes widened. He falsified his application? Not explicitly, I clarified. But he definitely stretched the truth beyond recognition. If his firm knew the actual numbers, his career would be over, Ellie finished. She studied me with newfound respect. Zoe Mitchell, you are not at all what my brother deserves. I smiled, the expression feeling unfamiliar after days of numbness. No, I agreed. I'm much more dangerous. Ellie reached for her phone. I'm going to help you. But first, we need to get you legal counsel. My friend Maya is a divorce attorney who specializes in high-conflict cases. She's a shark. We weren't married, I reminded her. No, but you were in a domestic partnership with significant financial entanglements. Trust me, you need Maya. As Ellie made the call, I gathered my evidence into organized files. The ring, the joint accounts, the lease, the car, the falsified partnership application. Each piece a lever I could use to pry back what was mine, and more. Rachel had told me I should thank her for saving me from James. Perhaps, in the end, she would be right, but not for the reasons she thought. Maya Chen's office smelled of leather and confidence. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, while her degrees from Harvard and Yale hung on the wall like battle standards. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with a sharp bob and sharper eyes that missed nothing. So, she said, after I'd laid out my situation, your fiancé left you for your best friend, drained your accounts, and now they're planning to use your wedding venue. That's the simplified version, I confirmed. She nodded, reviewing the documents I'd brought. And you don't want reconciliation. You want what's mine, I said firmly. And accountability. A small smile played at her lips. I like you already, Ms. Mitchell. For the next hour, we mapped out a strategy. Maya confirmed what I'd already suspected. I had more leverage than James or Rachel realized. The ring is definitively yours, she said, examining the certificate. The joint accounts are trickier. Technically, either party can withdraw funds. But his timing and the amount suggest bad faith, which we can use. What about the venue? The deposits? Since they were made from joint funds, and he broke the engagement through infidelity, we have grounds to claim those too. She tapped her pen against her desk. But from what you've told me, it sounds like you might want more than just financial restitution. I met her gaze. I want them to face consequences for more than just the money. Understanding flashed in her eyes. Then we need to be strategic. Every move carefully calculated for maximum impact. She outlined the legal steps we would take, warning me that emotions could cloud judgment. The best revenge isn't impulsive, she advised. It's patient, methodical, and it follows the letter of the law. I left her office with a solid plan and my first real sense of control since Rachel's text. Maya would handle the legal and financial aspects. But there were other allies I needed to recruit. My next stop was a coffee shop 3 blocks from Rachel's office. I wasn't there to confront her, not yet, but to meet someone who might help me understand what I was truly dealing with. Megan Phillips sat at a corner table, nervously shredding a napkin. We'd worked together at the marketing firm where Rachel and I had started our careers before I moved on to my current company. She'd left a year after me, and according to LinkedIn, now worked at a competitor. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I appreciate the short notice." Megan glanced around, as if expecting Rachel to materialize. "When I saw your message, I couldn't believe it." "Rachel and James? It's insane." "That's why I wanted to talk to you," I said carefully. "You know Rachel professionally, from a perspective I don't have." Megan hesitated, then leaned forward. "Look, I don't want to make things worse, but Rachel's not who you think she is." Over the next half hour, Megan revealed a pattern I hadn't fully understood despite 15 years of friendship. Rachel's calculated networking. Her ability to take credit for others' work. The trail of damaged careers she'd left in her wake. "She has a talent for attaching herself to rising stars," Megan explained. "Using their momentum, then discarding them when someone more promising comes along." Like me, I realized. I was useful until James became the better option. Megan nodded grimly. "Exactly. And she's not done climbing." "What do you mean?" "Her new position." "Did she tell you how she got it?" I shook my head. 3 people were in line ahead of her. Within 2 months, one transferred departments after a series of mistakes that looked an awful lot like sabotage. Another took a stress leave. The third was let go after confidential information was leaked, information only a few people had access to. "Including Rachel," I guessed. "Including Rachel," Megan confirmed. No one could prove anything, but the pattern was becoming clear. Rachel didn't just take what she wanted, she eliminated obstacles with calculating precision. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I already knew. Megan met my eyes. "Because she destroyed my career there. And because I think you're planning something, and I want to help." By early evening, I had recruited 3 more allies. Alex, who felt guilty about the lake house weekend. Sarah, who had confronted Rachel months ago, and Daniel, a former colleague who had his own reasons to see Rachel face consequences. We met at Ellie's apartment, away from any chance of being seen by Rachel or James. I laid out what I had learned, what Maya had advised, and what I planned to do next. "This isn't about petty revenge," I clarified. "This is about justice. About making them face the reality of what they've done." "I'm in," Alex said immediately. "You didn't deserve any of this." The others nodded their agreement. "What do you need from us?" Sarah asked. "Information. Evidence. Witnesses." I outlined specific tasks for each of them. Alex would document the timeline of deception from the friend group's perspective. Sarah would collect evidence of Rachel's professional manipulations. Daniel would gather information about her current workplace vulnerabilities. "And me?" Ellie asked. "You," I said with a small smile, "are going to be our inside person. James still trusts you. I need you to be the supportive sister while keeping your eyes and ears open." As my allies dispersed, each with their assignment, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, like the turning of a tide. James and Rachel had surrounded themselves with lies, but those same lies were now becoming the foundation of their undoing. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, her first attempt at contact in days. "Zoe, I heard you've been asking questions about me. I understand you're hurt, but this needs to stop. James and I just want to move forward without drama." I showed the message to Ellie, who was the last to leave. "She's getting nervous," Ellie observed. "Good." I didn't respond to Rachel's text. There would be time for words later. For now, I had more important work to do, building a case so airtight, so undeniable, that when the moment came, neither James nor Rachel would have anywhere to hide. The board was set. The pieces were moving. And they had no idea what was coming. 1 month after James walked out, I sat in my newly redecorated home office, reviewing the evidence my allies had gathered. The walls, once covered in photos of James and me, now displayed bold abstract art and my professional certifications. The space, like me, had been transformed, stronger, more focused, no longer defined by what I had lost. My phone rang with Maya's distinctive ringtone. "We have the go-ahead," she said without preamble. "Judge Watkins signed the order. You can proceed with the financial actions immediately." "Thank you," I replied, opening my laptop to the bookmarked banking pages. "And the other matter?" The cease and desist regarding the venue is being delivered to both parties this afternoon. The ring demand goes out simultaneously. I allowed myself a small smile. Perfect timing. The moment Maya ended the call, I began executing the financial strategy we'd developed. First, I formally froze the remaining joint accounts, not withdrawing funds like James had done, but legally preventing any further transactions pending resolution. Next, I submitted the documentation showing James's fraudulent use of our shared credit cards for his affair, disputing thousands in charges related to gifts for Rachel, hotel stays, and dinners. Finally, I transferred the mortgage payment from my personal account, the one James didn't know about, where I'd been quietly saving my own safety net for years. The house would stay securely mine while the legal proceedings unfolded. Each action was surgical, precise, and completely legal. Maya had ensured every move could be defended in court if necessary. By noon, my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. James, discovering the frozen accounts. Rachel, receiving the cease and desist about the venue. Their carefully constructed new life was hitting its first serious obstacles. I ignored the incoming calls and texts, focusing instead on the next phase. Following Maya's advice, I had prepared formal documentation for James's firm, not explicitly accusing him of professional misconduct, but bringing to their attention some concerning discrepancies. In client billings from our joint tax filings, I had also compiled a detailed dossier on Rachel's workplace behavior, including testimony from former colleagues about idea theft, credit appropriation, and strategic undermining of competitors. This would go to her company's HR department, anonymized but unmistakable. At 2 p.m., Alex texted, package delivered to Jay's firm. Receptionist confirmed it went straight to managing partner. 20 minutes later, Sarah confirmed, ours HR has received the documentation. Director is reviewing it now. The dominoes were falling exactly as planned. By 4:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera, unsurprised to see both James and Rachel standing on my porch. Rachel's face was flushed with anger, while James looked more confused than anything, still not comprehending that he was facing consequences of his own making. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and opened the door. This is harassment, Rachel began immediately, attempting to push past me into the house. You can't just, I can absolutely send a cease and desist regarding property purchased with my money, I interrupted calmly, blocking her entry. Just as I can freeze joint accounts pending legal resolution. James stepped forward, adopting the reasonable tone he used when he thought he could manage a situation. Zoe, we need to talk about this like adults. These financial moves are unnecessarily aggressive. Unnecessarily aggressive, I repeated. Like draining our joint savings the morning you left? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was poorly handled. But this scorched earth approach isn't helping anyone. It's helping me, I replied simply. Rachel's composure cracked further. The venue is non-refundable. You're just being petty, trying to ruin our day because you're jealous. I regarded her with cool detachment. The venue deposits were made from joint funds for a specific purpose, my wedding. Since that wedding was canceled due to infidelity, those funds are in dispute. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You can't just, I can and I have, I interrupted. But that's not all. I turned to James. You might want to check your work email. I believe your partners have some questions about certain client billings. His face paled. What did you do? I simply ensured transparency, I replied. Something you've never been particularly good at. Rachel's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down, and I watched the color drain from her face. You bitch, she whispered. You sent something to my work too, didn't you? Again, just creating transparency. Your colleagues deserve to know who they're really working with, don't you think? James stepped between us, suddenly aware that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. Zoe, whatever you think you're doing, I'm reclaiming what's mine, I stated plainly. My money, my property, my reputation, and ensuring that your actions have appropriate consequences. We can work this out, he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. Come on, be reasonable. I am being perfectly reasonable, I replied. In fact, I've been advised by counsel that my actions are remarkably restrained given the circumstances. I handed each of them a business card. This is my attorney, Maya Chen. Any further communication should go through her office. Rachel stared at the card, then at me, realization finally dawning in her eyes. You planned this, she said slowly. All of it. The timing, the coordination, I learned from the best, I replied, allowing myself a small smile. Watching you maneuver and manipulate for 15 years taught me a lot about strategic thinking. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her expression, the dawning understanding that she had catastrophically underestimated me. The ring, James said suddenly. You're demanding the ring back too? It's legally mine, I confirmed. Since you broke the engagement through infidelity, the conditional gift reverts to me. But you already knew that, didn't you? That's why you left it on the counter that day, hoping I'd be too emotional to remember the law. His silence confirmed my suspicion. You have 48 hours to return the ring before I escalate to formal legal proceedings, I continued. The same timeline applies to resolving the disputed funds. Rachel grabbed James's arm. Let's go. This is a waste of time. As they turned to leave, I called after them. Oh, and Rachel? She paused, looking back warily. You told me I should thank you for saving me from marrying James, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet street. You were right. I should thank you for showing me exactly who both of you really are before it was too late. I closed the door on their stunned faces, leaned against it, and exhaled slowly. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned. I had maintained control while they spiraled into defensive chaos. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. How did it go? I smiled as I typed my response. Perfectly. The first wave has hit. Now we wait for the tide to rise. Within hours, it would be clear to both James and Rachel that this was not a temporary setback or an emotional outburst they could dismiss. This was the beginning of a carefully orchestrated reckoning, one that would dismantle the future they had tried to build on the foundation of my pain. They had chosen their path. Now they would walk it to its inevitable conclusion. The conference room in Maya's office gleamed with polished wood and quiet power. I sat on one side of the long table, Maya beside me, case files neatly arranged before us. Across sat James and Rachel, flanked by their own attorney, a nervous man who kept adjusting his tie. 3 days had passed since our confrontation on my porch. 3 days of escalating consequences neither of them had anticipated. Let's begin, Maya said, her voice smooth and controlled. We're here to discuss resolution of the disputed assets and funds. James's attorney cleared his throat. My clients are willing to return 50% of the withdrawn funds as a good faith gesture. Maya smiled the way sharks might before feeding. That's not how joint accounts work in this state, as I'm sure you're aware. The full amount with interest is our starting position. Rachel shifted in her seat, her usual confidence notably absent. The company investigation triggered by my documentation had placed her on administrative leave pending review. James looked no better. His firm had launched a full audit of his client billings after my concerned letter. This vindictive campaign needs to stop, Rachel said suddenly, unable to contain herself. You've made your point, Zoe. I met her gaze calmly. This isn't about making a point. It's about accountability. We're losing everything, she hissed. Is that what you want? I want what's legally mine, I replied. Nothing more, nothing less. James leaned forward. Zoe, please. My career is on the line. The firm is questioning everything now. As they should, I said simply. Maya tapped her pen once, bringing focus back to the legal matters. The engagement ring, she prompted. James's attorney slid a small velvet box across the table. I opened it, confirming the emerald-cut diamond was inside, then passed it to Maya, who noted it in her documentation. The venue deposits, Maya continued. We've relinquished all claim, James's attorney confirmed reluctantly. The estate has been informed. One by one, we moved through each item, the disputed funds, the credit card charges, the mortgage arrangements. With each concession, Rachel's face hardened while James seemed to physically shrink. There's one more thing, I said as the meeting appeared to be wrapping up. Rachel tensed. What now? I slid a folder across the table. The honeymoon bookings you transferred to your names. I've arranged for those to be canceled and refunded to my account. You can't, Rachel began. She absolutely can, Maya interjected smoothly. Those were purchased with jointly held funds for a specific purpose. Rachel's facade finally cracked. This isn't fair. You're systematically destroying everything we've built. I studied her, this woman I'd once considered my closest friend. No, Rachel. I'm simply reclaiming what was taken from me. You chose this path the moment you decided I was disposable. I never said you were disposable, she protested. You didn't have to say it. You demonstrated it through your actions. The meeting concluded with Maya outlining the remaining steps. As we prepared to leave, James made one final desperate attempt. Zoe, he said quietly, I know we hurt you. But this level of retaliation, was it worth it? I gathered my papers, meeting his gaze directly. Ask me again in a year. Rachel remained seated as we left, staring at nothing, the perfect future she'd engineered disintegrating around her. For the first time since this began, I felt no satisfaction in her distress, only a quiet certainty that justice, however imperfect, was being served. The reckoning wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring balance to a world that had been violently tilted against me. And with each step, I reclaimed not just what was legally mine, but something far more valuable, my power. 1 year later, I stood in the garden of the estate that was supposed to have been my wedding venue, champagne flute in hand, watching as guests mingled in the warm September twilight. The string lights I'd once envisioned for my reception cast a gentle glow over the celebration, not of a marriage, but of a beginning. To Mitchell Consulting, Ellie said, appearing beside me and raising her glass. 1 year old and already dominating the industry. I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. Thanks for believing it was possible. After the legal dust had settled, I'd used my reclaimed funds to launch my own consulting firm. The venue deposit, returned in full thanks to Maya's efforts, had funded our first client event, held in the very space where I'd once planned to become James's wife. Seen the latest? Ellie asked, showing me her phone. I glanced at the LinkedIn notification. James had changed jobs again, his third position since the partnership track at his previous firm had abruptly ended. Each move had been a step down. The latest was for a small company in another state. And Rachel? I asked, though I already knew. Still trying to rebuild her reputation. That ethics investigation was thorough. I nodded, feeling neither joy nor sorrow at their struggles. They had become characters in a story I no longer needed to read. The evening breeze carried the scent of late roses as I circulated among my guests, clients, colleagues, and true friends who had stood beside me during the darkest days. Maya was there too, having become both mentor and friend through our work together. You're 6 o'clock, she murmured as we chatted near the dessert table. Don't look surprised. I turned casually to see Rachel standing at the entrance, looking uncertain and out of place. She'd lost weight, and her once immaculate appearance seemed slightly disheveled. Our eyes met across the garden. With a brief word to Maya, I made my way toward the unexpected visitor. Rachel, I said, my voice neutral. This is a surprise. She glanced around at the successful gathering. I heard about your company launch. Congratulations. Thank you, I replied, genuinely curious about her presence. What brings you here? She hesitated. I wanted to see for myself. If you were okay, if you had moved on. As you can see, I gestured to the thriving event around us. I also wanted to say. She paused, the words clearly difficult. You were right. About everything. I thought I was trading up, but I was just running away from my own inadequacies. I nodded, acknowledging her words without offering absolution. James and I didn't last, she added unnecessarily. He left 3 months ago. For someone else? I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded, a bitter smile twisting her lips. History repeats. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared past stretching between us like a shadow growing longer in the setting sun. You know, she finally said, I really did think I was saving you from a mediocre life with him. I considered her words, then offered the truth I'd discovered in the aftermath of destruction. You were right about one thing, Rachel. You did save me, just not in the way you intended. She looked up, surprised. I would never have found this strength, this version of myself, without having to rebuild from nothing. I smiled genuinely. So yes, in a way, I should thank you. Her eyes filled with tears. I felt no triumph at her distress, no lingering desire for revenge. The woman who had needed those things had transformed into someone stronger, someone who understood that the best reclamation wasn't in destroying others, but in rebuilding oneself. As Rachel left, and I rejoined my celebration. I realized the greatest victory wasn't in what I had taken back, but in what I had created from the ruins, a life that was authentically, powerfully mine.